to work on Catalyst Black, a top-down PvP arena shooter that we released in June 2022. And now I'm EP for TMNT Splintered Fate, and there's going to be lots more to come on that game in this presentation. So before Super Evil Motorcorp, I worked for 10 years at Natural Motion, which was acquired by Zynga during that time. I spent many years as a data scientist, specializing in monetization, optimizations, and working primarily on the CSR Racing franchise, which actually started just down the road from here and is the reason why I moved to Brighton many years ago. And I'm really glad I did. So I hope everyone enjoys their time in the city over the next few days. After CSR Racing, I worked as lead product manager on the recently released free-to-play mobile shooter Star Wars Hunters. Okay, so today I'm going to take you through the journey with TMNT Splintered Fate and how we released on mobile and are now on the verge of releasing on Switch. I'll start by introducing Super Evil Megacorp, our mission and what cross-platform means to us. And then I'll take you through our experience launching on a paid subscription service before our journeys onto console. Finally, I'll wrap up with how we brought the game to market and then a few conclusions. Okay, so let me introduce Super Evil Megacorp. So we're a studio now of over 100 developers, and we aren't based anywhere. So we are a fully remote global studio, and we see that as one of our many strengths. And together we focus on making shared gameplay experiences. So I've been now working at Super Evil Megacorp for 2.5 years, and it's been an incredible time. Our approach to flexible hours and working from anywhere has really allowed for me to personally have a great family and work balance. So last year, for example, I spent 6 weeks working from and exploring the Western Cape in South Africa. And then I spent a further separate 2 weeks working from a tent in the Isle of Wight. So you really can work from anywhere, and that's something that we celebrate at Super Evil. We also greatly believe in results rather than set hours, which is something that having a young family has really helped me balance the needs of both work and my personal life. So, for example, quite often I'll work for 4 hours or so very early in the morning, get lots done while it's nice and quiet and I can focus. And then I'll take a 4-hour extended lunch break before returning to work in the evening, feeling refreshed and invigorated and actually much more productive as a result. So what really drives us, though, at Super Evil is building shared gameplay moments. So as a child in the 90s and then teenager in the noughties, I pretty much grew up with a controller in my hands and a set of friends on the sofa next to me. The joy of playing games together is truly a unique experience and something we at Super Evil Megacorp are really passionate for. In everything we build, we want to arrive at that high five moment with friends. You know, that moment when you've done something awesome together, you've won that team fight, you've beaten that boss, and thereby you're building a core memory that lasts. Our mission is to recreate that feeling, whatever platform is your native gaming home. So SEMC was founded on the belief that gamers want to play great games, regardless of what platform they're on. And back in 2014, we identified a lack of PvP competitive games for mobile. Some people may remember 10 years ago when Super Evil released the critically and commercially successful Vainglory, a MOBA which was designed for touch controls. Since then, we've released the award-winning Catalyst Black, which won Samsung Game of the Year, and more recently, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate. So, first, though, just let me talk a little bit about cross-platform and what that really means to us and our approach to ensuring that every game that we make is cross-platform from day one. So, the most important design element we found is what we call the 3 Cs. And you've probably heard of this before, but I'm going to reiterate it anyway because it's really important. Controls, camera, and character. And over time, we've really learned that it's much easier to plan from cross-platform from the beginning than it is to try and alter and adapt later on. So to do this, we rigorously playtest on a mix of physical controllers, virtual joysticks, and the mouse and keyboard controls from early on in our prototype phase all the way through development, using as well a variety of screen sizes and resolutions. So we try to make sure that those controls, the camera, and the characters of our games are truly fit for cross-play in a way where players feel like they are first-class citizens and can meaningfully engage with each other, no matter what platform, what input method, or what screen size they're using. So we also made one big policy decision, which was to ensure that all of our developers, no matter their role, have access to a range of devices and a Bluetooth controller, which, being fully remote, is a logistical challenge, but one that's worth it. So we have now a wide range of coverage of devices across the whole team, and we've also adapted our playtest methodology to include that the team reports which device and controls they're using each test, and we encourage people to change regularly. Also, by tracking it, we know if any device or controls aren't getting the attention that they need, and we can rectify that quickly. Lastly, it's incredibly important that our games run on all of our target devices. So any bugs that prevent this are raised as blockers immediately and worked on, no matter how minor the device or low end it might be. Of course, there will be some adaptations and refinements for each platform as you proceed, but we want to make the game feel native and, of course, we want the core of each game to always hold up well across these 3 Cs. So next up is our secret sauce. This is our proprietary Evil engine, and something that we at Super Evil are incredibly proud of. So the Evil engine is designed to be cross-platform, and it delivers exceptional quality from low-end mobile devices all the way through to high-end PCs. And not only is it built for quality, it's also built for those shared experiences, with multiplayer gaming at the forefront of every technical decision that's been made. So, being our own engine also means we can really quickly adapt to any new hardware that is released, and also we can prioritize what matters to us. We aren't dependent on any third-party engine providers. Our engine's now mature and have well over 10 years of development, so we're really fortunate. I'm not sure I could stand here today and recommend someone start building their own engine, but what I would say is really think carefully about your choice of technology and how it fits into your goals as a game maker. Okay, now let's talk about TMNT Splintered Fate. Okay, so I'm going to rewind a little bit first and start with our experience of launching the game on a subscription platform, and that's Apple Arcade. So Apple Arcade, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's a monthly subscription service, and you get access to hundreds of games, and you can play those games on your iPhones, your iPads, Apple TVs, and Macs. All for one single monthly payment, and then there's no further monetization involved. So, TMNT Splintered Fate is an action roguelike game. So if you think Hades with turtles and then 4-player co-op, you've probably now got a pretty good mental model of what this game is like. But the unique traits of Splintered Fate are that it's the first ever TMNT roguelike. In fact, it's one of the very few Turtles games that isn't an action brawler. And additionally, unlike most roguelike competitors, it can be played fully in both single player and 4-player, up to 4-player cooperative. So the game was built to be cross-platform from the start. So, that means for us, those 3 Cs, also the technology and then the visuals. When we launched Splintered Fate in 2023, it ran on all iPhones and iPads from the 6S upwards, which I think was 2015. So nearly 8 years worth of hardware. It also ran on the Apple TVs and Macs using controllers, touch input, or keyboard. And players could play cooperatively together, regardless of which device each player was using. Okay, but first though, let's now watch a quick trailer so you can actually see what I'm talking about.
Leo, he's gone. Splinter's gone.
Father? Father! He's gone, guys. What do we do now?
We stop talking and start smashing, that's what.
All over again. Practice makes perfect. Boss vibes in the house.
I need to collect more data, whatever it takes. Nice. Your family's doom is at hand. Your brothers, your pathetic fool of a father. We're gonna come get you, Sensei. Nothing's getting in our way.
And so in May 2023, that game was launched on Apple Arcade. And we had an absolutely incredible moment in the sun with our launch. We worked together with Apple to be part of a huge push for the Apple Arcade. We were one of 20 games that was simultaneously released to the platform. And we hit the #1 slot in our first week. So we were super proud of that achievement. Apple and Paramount, who are the owners of the TMNT franchise, both got fully behind the game. We had incredible featuring on the App Store. We had featuring all across Nickelodeon.com, as well as Apple hosting a fantastic Q&A session in their flagship New York Apple Store with some of the developers. And then finally, tons and tons of social media postings. But if that wasn't enough, we also had a billboard in Times Square featuring the game. And players loved it. Reviews included comments like best TMNT game in years and feels and plays like a full-featured console game, which really validated the goals that we had set out to achieve with this game. With a rating of over 4.7 out of 5 stars, we were quite rightly feeling pretty pleased with ourselves. And it wasn't just praise. Critically, the press were really enjoying the game, and we saw some great articles from the press within the mobile space. And then also many of the larger press outlets were running articles on the release of the 20 games for Apple Arcade, and often mentioning TMNT Splintered Fate as being a noteworthy title amongst the releases. So now we were post-launch, and it came time to update the game. So since well before the game had even launched, in fact, we had had our plan for the first 3 updates, which were going to focus around the Punk Frogs. So if you're not familiar with the TMNT franchise, the Punk Frogs are basically a chaotic parallel of the Turtles. Their origins are as mutant frogs, and they were created by Shredder and tricked into believing that the Turtles were evil. And so as Splinter had named the Turtles after his favorite artists, Shredder decided to use his favorite dictators. So here you've got Genghis Frog, and he actually already featured in the game at launch. And then his brothers are Attila, Rasputin, and Napoleon. And so we thought it'd be really fun for updates to explore the narrative further and how that they were involved in the story of Splintered Fate. So we were really committed to making these 3 updates great. And we had a dedicated team to build and release them over the 6 months post-launch. Each update featured a new fight, which included the Punk Frogs, so that be it a mini-boss or a variant of our existing boss fights to add much more variety into the existing gameplay. Not only that, but we also built new turtle powers for every update, which are sort of the instant upgrades during a run, and they last until the end of your run. We also built new permanent upgrades for longer-term investment. And if that wasn't enough, we also built some extra end-game challenges and achievements for players to unlock. Unfortunately, I would say in hindsight, we really over-indexed on our end-game players here, people that were already enjoying the content and engaged in the game. So whilst the quality bar was really high, we were all really pleased and enjoyed the updates, and we got some absolutely great featuring on the store, it didn't really shift the KPIs that mattered for the platform. So the way I like to think about subscription platforms is imagine that they are a shopping center on the outskirts of a city. People don't go to these big malls to visit one individual shop. They go for the collection of shops. They'll have their favorites and they visit those each time they go, but they'll also walk past and they'll try all of the new shops. And then additionally, that shopping center itself is working really hard to attract more customers to come and visit the center for the first time. So to be successful then, each individual shop is working hard with their window displays to try and attract new customers in. They have to have something really interesting inside their store immediately to hook customers and not make them walk out. And then they're very deliberate with their layout to try and draw customers deeper and deeper into the store to see what they've got to offer. So if the subscription platform is like the shopping center, it's working hard to attract new players all the time to the platform, and you're like the shop. You've got the store page, you've got featuring on the platform to try and attract new customers in, but once they get in, you have to work really hard to keep them. So we took a very different approach with our fourth update. So what we wanted to do was really focus on our initial experience. And one of the greatest strengths of this game was our narrative. We're really proud of the story of TMNT Splintered Fate. In fact, it was co-written by legendary TMNT writer Tom Waltz, whose notable releases most recently include The Last Ronin, which hopefully lots of people have heard of. If you haven't, you really should check it out. So what we went with the main feature for our fourth update was what we called Story Mode. It was a significantly reduced difficulty mode to allow players to really enjoy the story of Splintered Fate. We didn't want to trivialize the gameplay, but redesigned that difficulty curve to allow players to sort of set the difficulties they wanted, and we allowed players then to also change the difficulty whilst they were playing. What we did in the traditional mode was after you beat each chapter, and the game is split into 4 chapters, the next one is significantly harder than the previous one, increasing the damage of enemies, increasing their health, and also giving them new abilities that the player wouldn't have seen before. What we did for story mode was we reduced how much each chapter increased by difficulty, flattening the curve right down, and then we also made the very first chapter a little bit easier. So the overall effect is that the game starts just a tiny bit easier than it did before, but by the time you've reached the final chapter, the game is significantly easier as that difficulty is compounded. That wasn't the only thing we did with the update. We also used data to identify where the places were that people were getting stuck within the game, and we retuned those fights. So, for example, as a dev team now, we were all getting pretty good at the game. We'd played quite a lot of it. We'd been working on it for well over a year. So what we did is we kind of just tried to play through without using the dash ability, because we were seeing in the data that a lot of players were dropping off at our first mini-boss fight, who was designed to be, maybe he looked challenging, but it was designed to actually be quite easy, so the players felt they'd overcome something difficult early on in their experience. What we found when we went in without using dash is that actually his AoE attacks were overlapping and stacking up to 5 times. So what looked like a fairly safe, slightly damaging pool of acid actually was dealing over 5 times as much damage as it should have been. So that was one of the things that we immediately fixed. And then the last major change that we went for was the economy. We wanted players to feel much more invested in this game early on. So what we did was that we increased the rate that coins dropped in the very early game, and then we also reduced the price of the upgrades that we thought made the most difference to try and really encourage players into buying those first as to maybe something that's only going to marginally improve their experience. So these changes together, that story mode, damage tuning, and economy tuning, all really helped us to see a lift in our D1 retention. So my advice here is that if you're planning to rely on a subscription platform, you really need to overly focus on that very early player journey. This is just like you would for a free-to-play game. And I think this is where maybe, we evolved our thinking over time, is actually, even though players are paying for the platform, they are paying their monthly subscription, they downloaded your game for free. And so you really need to work hard to convince them to stay, just as you would if you were a free-to-play game. So the key takeaways for us as being part of this subscription service were that you really must optimize your game for the platform that you're going onto. So most services will incentivize based on some kind of metric related to how much players are playing the game. So retention is always going to be your golden KPI. And just like free-to-play, your day one retention is going to have the largest impact overall. So spend lots of time thinking about that, optimizing for it. Plan your update strategy also to be considerate of how you can reuse the content you've already made. Aim to be able to run your game with a small core team. So subscription platforms are actually really good providing a healthy number of new players to you over time. So, a small team is going to have a really good opportunity to make a real impact. And then lastly, if you want to get noticed on the platform, then featuring is really the most important way that you have. So unlike in free-to-play gaming, where your traditional UA adverts are going to attract lots of attention, the drop-off is just enormous as soon as you get to the step where they have to subscribe. So they might click through on your adverts, and then they'll see that they have to subscribe to the platform, and you'll instantly lose nearly all of your audience. So platform featuring, though, really assures that you're targeting people that have already subscribed to the service, and then you can get a much, much greater click-through. So my advice there is, if you want to secure those features, then work and reach out regularly to the platform holder that you're working with. So check in with them, show them the progress you're making, and then really listen. If they give you any feedback, listen to that feedback and action on it, and make sure you follow up at the very least with the platform holder on what you're going to do with that feedback. So for us, Apple was a really great partner, and we got really good rounds of featuring with each of our updates, and it really made a huge difference. So yeah, Apple Arcade was going really well, but we really wanted more people to play this game. We really love that Apple Arcade let us bring this game to life, but just the nature of a subscription platform is that only subscribers are going to get to play your game, and that just sucks. So we had a discussion with Apple, and they agreed that it made sense for this game to come to new other non-competing platforms. So by broadening the reach of this game, we were going to boost engagement with multiplayer. There was going to be more updates for the Apple players because we could use the funds from other platforms to help improve the game. So it really was a win-win situation for us to take this to new platforms. So yeah, like I've already said, we design all our games to be cross-platform and cross-play from day one. And we believe, gamers are gamers and have the right to enjoy those games regardless of the platform that they're on. However, due to the nature of Apple Arcade and the need for us to get the game to market, we had put most of our effort into optimizing the experience for touch. And we're really proud of how responsive and precise and easy to play the game was. And that's thanks largely to our really intuitive UI, as well as the Evil engine. We did support controllers from day one, but the level of polish just wasn't the same. And at Super Evil, we banned the P word. I'm going to say it once, and then I won't say it again. So we didn't want to port this game. It was really important to us as game makers, and also to our reputation, that the game felt optimized for the primary inputs of every platform that we supported. And it also had to look, had to feel, and it had to run great. So we knew we wanted to be on new platforms, but which ones and when? So to decide, we first took a step back to assess what we had. We had a great game. We loved it, players loved it, and most importantly, it was also a finished product. It was also built in our custom Evil engine. So that meant we had full control over the technology, allowing us to build and do anything that we could really think of. So there were no technical limitations in our next steps. The game had been built and designed from the ground up for cross-platform. In fact, one of the many things that attracted us to Apple Arcade was that it came with 3 distinct platforms. In fact, 4 if you actually include the Vision Pro, which probably most of you might not. So it really let us demonstrate our strengths as making cross-platform games. So yeah, remember those 3 C's: the controls, the camera, and the character. And we have play tested with every combination you can think of from day one. So we were confident in our abilities there. And our game already supported controllers, and it supported mouse and keyboard, so new platforms weren't going to be a problem. The last major point in our favor is that the TMT brand is currently booming right now. Last year, we'd seen the release of the successful TMNT Mutant Mayhem film at cinemas. And then this year is actually the 40th anniversary of the TMNT franchise. So there were loads of things stacked in our favor. And we also had feedback coming from the community regularly on places like Reddit that they wanted to see this game on new platforms and asking when we were going to do it. So we felt really confident in our plan to expand. There were some challenges, and they're the obvious ones: time and people. I'm sure nearly all small to medium-sized companies have faced these exact same challenges, and we were no different. For us, there was no button to just deploy to a new platform. In fact, at the time, at the start of the year, our proprietary Evil engine at that point didn't have full support for consoles. But we had full control over that technology, and we also had a team of very experienced engineers. So we knew we could do it. It would just take some time. But that was also something we didn't have loads of, because we really wanted to make sure that we were riding the wave of the TMNT brand. Secondly, we're only a small team. We're part of a moderately sized company, but we're working on multiple projects. And so the number of people available to work on this game, whilst they're extremely experienced, was limited in number. So there wasn't, a way for us to do everything at once. So we had two options available to us at this point. We could either go out, recruit a load of people and try to do everything at once, or we could work smart. We could look for the opportunities to amplify the game as we bring it to market, a platform at a time. So we went out and we spoke to many platform holders and store owners to see what the opportunities were and how they might be able to support us if we brought the game to their platform first. And we just loved the enthusiasm that Nintendo came back with for the game. They were really excited to work with us, and we were really excited to work on the Switch. It just felt like a great move forward for us. So we went for it. And in April 2024, we were really proud to be part of their Indie World Showcase. And I'm really pleased to be able to show you that trailer now.
Order up some pizza, because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are back on Nintendo Switch.
In their very first radical roguelike adventure, Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo must travel through reality-bending portals to rescue their kidnapped master, Splinter.
With each run, you'll fend off the totally bogus Foot Clan while enhancing your abilities with power-ups. But no two runs are the same. Upgrade your turtle powers to grow stronger and shred through the story.
The four turtles each have their signature weapons and awesome abilities. For example, Donnie's attacks have more range, but Raph has a higher chance of dealing critical damage. After clearing each room, you get to choose from a variety of turtle powers to customize your moveset and create devastating combos. Don't get too attached though, because these powers reset when a run ends.
More customization options await back at your sewer home, where you can spend in-game currency you earned on your runs on permanent upgrades called artifacts. Pick the turtle and artifact that best suit your preferred playstyle.
Enjoy exploring iconic locations solo, or jump online with up to 3 bodacious buds in co-op play. Your team of turtles can drop in and out whenever they want, making for a no-crash play sesh. Get ready to fight the foot when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate launches as a timed console exclusive on Nintendo Switch this July.
Pizza's here!
And yeah, the announcement went really well. So we were the most viewed trailer of all of the games that featured as part of the Indie World. And the feedback from players was overwhelmingly positive. So whilst it wasn't a competition, it certainly felt like we were winning. And this feedback from the community really helped to fuel the team and energize them. It was a really fantastic moment for us. But we had to get back and finish the game, had to make it. So during development, originally we'd over-indexed on touch. And we did that knowing it would be by far the most popular choice of input. We thought really carefully about the button placement and the size of each button to ensure that they were all really easy reach from the thumb, and that those closest to where you commonly tap were the most used abilities. And then we also ensured that you could either tap or hold buttons for repeated attacks. We knew that controllers were used on Apple devices, so supporting them from day one was a must. And it's something that we do for all of our games, but now we were asking ourselves, how can we make this perfect for the Switch? We'd placed clear glyphs next to each of those touch buttons to show how to control the game, and it worked really well, but we felt that it didn't look like how you'd expect a console game. So we took a step back, we looked around at the similar titles, and we decided that for our game, it would be best to have a really simplified HUD. We wanted to allow players to really focus on the action. And here's what we did. We drastically reduced the size of that gameplay HUD whilst ensuring that all the critical information was still available. Similarly, all of our UI menus had been optimized for touch too. We had really large buttons and they were easy to press. But the problem with these screens is that it became kind of tricky to navigate them with controller. It worked, but it wasn't optimized. And, things that should have been a single button press were likely two. So, for example, our character select screen, which was just a row of turtles, for touch, really easy. You tap on the character you want, and then you tap go. On a controller, though, this UX felt pretty awkward. You had to navigate around the screen to find the character you wanted, press the A button, then you'd navigate back across to this go button, you'd press A again. What we wanted was a really simple experience that changed the character as you navigated around the screen and then locked in your choice with just a single press of the A button. But how do we communicate that to players was where we needed to think a bit. We didn't have time on our side to go back and redesign all of the screens and have a new layout. And in fact, actually, we were pretty happy with how our screens overall looked. But we also wanted to have a single solution that worked across the whole game. So what we developed is what we called the console bar. We just then had to go through every screen in the game and remove all of those touch buttons. So the example, that big yellow one on the side there. We also had lots of back buttons in the corner and X's on pop-ups, all things you wouldn't expect to see on a console screen. So we just went through and replaced every screen, adding on this widget at the bottom, and then clearly labeling what the controls for each screen were. Okay, so these next two changes, perhaps they don't fall under the category of optimizing for the platform, but they were still ones that were really important to us, and I really want to share them. So, as I've already mentioned, we've been thinking a lot about our initial player journey as part of the previous update for Apple Arcade. But one of the things we hadn't had a chance to do was to go back and refine our initial tutorial, where we taught players the controls. This was a great chance for us to go back to that tutorial and add some extra prompts to ensure that the controls and inputs were clear for all new players. And this is a change that we're really looking forward as well to bring into the Apple Arcade players soon. The next change, though, was maybe more for vanity, but it was something that really is important to us, is that as soon as everyone came to the game, we wanted them to know that things had changed. And what better way to do that than to update the title screen? So this is the first screen that a player sees, and it's now got a brand new stylish look. So even if a player is returning, maybe they played the game before in Apple Arcade, when they come to the Switch, they're going to instantly know that the game has been updated. And likewise, when we update the Apple Arcade version, they'll see from the moment they start the game that there's been a big overhaul. Okay, but meeting expectations has never been enough for us at Super Evil. We really wanted the game to noticeably look better as well. So players would know that this was a serious release and something that we were truly invested for in the future. So we went through and we relit all of our levels, added loads of new props to really make the game world feel much richer. It was a pretty large undertaking, but one that we really think has paid off, as you can see in this before and after screenshot. Okay, the game now looked great and it played great on a controller on the Switch, but unfortunately you could only play alone. Previously, all of our online multiplayer required being Apple Game Center friends, which doesn't exist on Switch. So we looked into the Nintendo Friends system, and that would have worked, but Nintendo Friends would only then be able to play with Nintendo friends, and Apple friends would play with Apple friends, which we were thinking bigger than that. So just as our game is built in the Evil engine, all of our backend services are built on what we call the Evil platform. So this gives us full control over our whole tech stack. So we looked at loads of solutions. Third-party friend systems were just a no-go for us, as either they weren't available on every platform that we aspired to eventually be on, or they required players to sign up for yet another service that they most likely didn't want and wouldn't use again. We thought about building our own friend service, but again, that kind of felt a bit like overkill for what was going to be a lot of investment for a limited return. So what we did is we went with a pin system. One player simply starts the match, and on their screen, they'll see a very large run code They share that with their friends in any way that they wish. Maybe they shouted at them. Maybe they send them a text message or a Discord. Doesn't matter. That's entirely up to them. And then that friend enters the pin, and hey presto, they're in a game together, regardless of platform. Apple people instantly, we were testing this with Apple matching with Switch, and it just worked. Okay, so game's working, multiplayer's working, everything's great, and then the last step is always your lot check. Prepare for submission. So lot check is just the name that Nintendo used for their approval process, and all platforms will most likely have their own version, and it's just a required step to get your game approved, ready for set. The process is just there to ensure that you comply with all of their guidelines. You can't list your game on the eShop or start collecting wish lists and pre-orders until you've passed this step. So for console, it's a more lengthy process than we were used to on mobile. So, you know, be prepared for it if you go down this route. There are hundreds of guidelines, so I would advise that you get your QA teams reading up on them early and start listing out test cases for those that apply to you. Not every guideline applies to every game. So the key thing is really to just plan loads of time for this step, and I can't overemphasize that enough. The submission alone will take you 2 weeks, just to have the game tested and to find out whether you pass or fail. Around 50% anecdotally is what we've heard first-time submissions will fail at. So odds of 50-50. And if you do fail, there are steps you can do to try and ask for waivers and to not have to resubmit. But if you do resubmit, then that's starting that 2-week process again. And the other thing to remember is this process is entirely external to your team. You have to wait for your turn. So you could get unlucky. You could get stuck in a queue behind 100 other games that all decided to submit the day before you, and you just have to wait. Or maybe there's an event happening at Nintendo. An anecdote for us was that we submitted our first time during Golden Week in Japan, and that added a full week to our submission because there was just no one from the Japanese team available to do some of the required tests. So yeah, leave lots of time. The one thing for us, though, that made the whole process quite a bit easier was that we hired a senior QA specialist who had a lot of experience in the process. We were fortunate that we needed to make that hire anyway, and so we made sure we went out and looked for someone to bring that experience to the team, and it really paid off. And then the last point I would say on this process is that there is a lot of paperwork that goes alongside it, a lot of online forms to fill out, so you can get ahead of this, start doing it early, have someone double check. You don't want to fail just because you didn't tick a tick box. So key lessons for us. Before you begin expanding to platforms, learn as much as you can. Don't rush. Make sure your game runs really well and that the platform looks and feels like it was always meant to be there. And then, yeah, plan lots of time for lot check. It's important. Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to try and introduce our marketing strategy. We had one very simple high-level goal for this, which was to make this the Switch game of the summer, one that you all have to try. So bringing a console game to market is actually fairly similar to mobile in many ways. And the first step is to know your audience. We'd always known our core audience for some time was roguelike gamers and TMNT fans. And that was regardless of what platform we were going on. We had loads of data already on those, and we were very familiar with them. We'd been working closely with Paramount Games and already mentioned Tom Waltz, the TMNT writer. And so we had a lot of understanding on what made TMNT fans and roguelike gamers tick. But if you want your game to be successful, it's also important to remember and understand what those opportunity markets are for you. And so for us, this was general action gamers, and as we were expanding to the Switch, fans of Nintendo. These were going to be a crucial market for us. So we made sure that we used the co-op nature of the game, the roguelike experience, and the power of the IP to focus strongly in a few key areas that spoke to action, roguelike, TMNT, and fans who play on the Switch. We also had to refine our business model. We weren't going to be part of the subscription platform anymore. And, you know, free-to-play was never going to be an option for this game. We would have had to fundamentally redesign the whole experience. And that wasn't something we wanted to do. So the obvious answer for us was to move to be a premium product. This meant that we had to decide on a price. And so I'd always advise on any decision you're making, look at the data that's available to you. So we went out, looked at our competitors, that our audience that we'd already defined was playing, and it was pretty clear what our price range had to be. So we modeled out several scenarios taking into account store fees, discounting, and licensing fees. So it's really important to balance your books. Always do that due diligence. Anecdotally, we learned that for your first year, digital sales that are around 2/3 of full price due to discounting that will happen over that period. So make sure it all adds up. And then we had to establish our marketing milestones. So while this slide looks really simple, it was actually a huge effort just to align on these 3 dates. So the first date was completely outside of our control, and we didn't even know what it was going to be until about 2 days before it even happened. And that was the announced through Nintendo. They completely owned that beat, but we had to supply an awful lot of materials and had to be also showing progress on the software that we could deliver on the dates. The following 2 dates were then a negotiation between our marketing teams and our production team. We all wanted the game to come out soon, but we also had to identify a good slot for it. We, at the same time, had to be confident that we could do it and the game would be ready for release, and account for that lot check process. So after some back and forward, adjusting our scope slightly, we really managed to align on this mid-July date for our launch. It felt like a really great time for us, where we should, as a AA title, be able to get a good slot. There shouldn't be any AAA games releasing in this window. And then also, it's just before the summer break starting, and perhaps people would miss the news of any releases. And then the middle date there is our release date announcement. And by this point, what's the point in announcing your date if you can't then start taking your pre-orders? So we had to be sure that we could pass lot check by this date, and it got very close for us, but we managed it. And on the June 20th, we globally announced our release date, and Nintendo got fully behind us, and Paramount, using all of their social channels, we could start taking pre-orders. So now all that's left is next week to launch the game. Key takeaways for us were to know your core audience intimately, but also identify where your opportunities are to expand and see growth, and ensure that your campaign includes beats for all of those audiences. Make sure your production teams and your marketing teams are talking to each other. All of your key dates will rely on deliverables from both of them. And then lastly, console in many ways was much harder for us than mobile. The opportunities are there, but you really have to go out and find them. There isn't like a single mediation platform where you can just launch 1,000 adverts. For example, one thing that we did was reach out to specialized press that we knew loved the genre, and then pitch some article ideas, offer time for interviews. In fact, just yesterday, my first ever published interview went live on Nintendo Life. So if you want to see a bit more information about the title, go check that out. Right, in summary, start thinking about cross-platform from day one. Remember those 3 C's: camera, controls, character, and regularly test with different inputs and different screen sizes to ensure you're staying on track. That alone is not enough. You need to then also make sure you're optimizing for every platform you support. So be that subscription platforms where you need that great onboarding and early retention, or maybe on the Switch where players want to know, can they play with a single Joy-Con? Or do you support couch co-op? Do your homework. Who are your audience? What are they playing? What platforms do they play on? And then why do they play on those platforms? If you can answer those questions, then you're doing pretty well. And finally, remember to be a great partner. It is really hard to get noticed out there. So find friends that can amplify your voice. And so I'd like to just take a moment to really particularly thank Apple, Paramount, and Nintendo for all of the incredible support they've each offered us during our development journey. And we look forward to continue working with them as we continue to develop this title. We're also looking forward to working with new partners and platforms in the future, and are always open to kicking off those discussions on how we can work together. Okay, so thank you for listening. If you're interested in TMNT Splintered Fate, you can play it right now on Apple Arcade, or go and pre-order and wishlist on Switch, and it releases July 17th, next Wednesday. I'm happy to take a few questions if there's time. If not, feel free to approach me anytime during the conference. No, I don't think we're out. I think we're out of time, so just come find me. But yeah, thank you, everyone.